Ladies and gentlemen, good morning and good afternoon. Welcome to the Policy Dialogue on presenting a new vision for Asia-Africa cooperation on natural gas. My name is Yuna Che. I'm the External Relations and Communication Officer of the African Development Bank. It is my great honor that I will be taking you through today's webinar together with the prominent panelists and our colleagues. This webinar is co-organized by the Asia External Representation Office and African Natural Resources Management and Investment Center of the African Development Bank. The event aims to explore the natural gas industry in Africa and the critical role of the cooperation between Asia and Africa in unlocking domestic and global natural gas supply chains. I'm very confident that you will leave this afternoon inspired by our distinguished panelists. So I'm really delighted to wish you a productive and informative and exciting event. So please permit me to welcome the first speaker, Mr. Naoshige Kinoshita. Mr. Kinoshita was a Chief Investment Officer at Energy Financial Solution, Policy and Regulation in the African Development Bank from 2018 to 2021. He was a task manager of a Mozambique Area 1 LNG project. He is now currently a Deputy Head and Principal External Relations and Communication Officer at the AFDB Asia External Representation Office in Tokyo. So, Mr. Kinoshita, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Yuna-san. And I'm really privileged to set the scene for the policy dialogue new vision for Africa, Asia-African cooperation on natural gas. And my name is Naoshige Kinoshita from the Asian External Representation Office of African Development Bank. I would like to express my gratitude to all the distinguished speakers and audience in this webinar. Today, we have wonderful speakers both from Africa and Asia, namely from APPO, Africa Energy Chamber, Taka Gas, CNPC, IWEP, Korea Gas Technology, JOGMEC, and AFDB Energy Complex. I think this is a dream team when we talk about Africa-Asia gas cooperation. Ms. Yuna is going to introduce the speaker properly very soon. The purpose of today's policy dialogue is to raise awareness among the Africa and Asian public about the benefits of developing the natural gas industry in Africa. It is important to raise cooperation between Africa and Asia in the natural gas sector at different levels to lead the development and industrialization in Africa. First, collaboration is essential between the two regions to deal with growing gas demand in both regions and supply potential in Africa. Africa is expected to emerge as a significant player in the global gas market as a producer, consumer, and exporter in the coming decades. According to Gas Exporting Countries Forum's Gas Outlook 2050, Africa's natural gas production will increase more than double, pushing its global production share from the current 6% to 11% in 2050. In Africa, natural gas will be responsible for the continent's primary energy for power generation and the region's contribution to socio-economic development. On the other hand, Asia will represent the most significant growth engine for natural gas demand, contributing to half of the global net demand increase. Second, the partnership is vital for investment and financing aspects. Further investment is indispensable from Asia to Africa to fulfill gas infrastructure needs to access global markets. For example, although the project is currently stopped due to the security situation in Mozambique, the Area 1 LNG project in the country envisages exporting more than 50% of the gas to Asia. CNPC is one of the potential off-takers. CNPC is a speaker today, and the project is also involves investors from Japan, such as Mitsui and JOGMEC, and also India. As you know, JOGMEC is also speaker today. And for your reference, AFDB is one of the lender of this project, along with JBIC and NEXI. Third, the partnership between the regions in terms of technology is also essential. Samsung Heavy Industries in Korea completed construction of floating LNG facility in Coral South Floating LNG project in Mozambique. Thanks to this successful story, Eni, the Italian sponsor of this project, now proposing a second floating LNG facility to circumvent potential political security risks that have been disrupt building an onshore plant in the project. For your information, CNPC and also Coalgas Group, the speakers today, are shareholder of this project. Finally, it is also important to mention how we should deal with the natural gas in the context of Paris Agreement under the UNFCCC. We look forward to today's debates and discussion, which could indicate both climate change and development aspect as represented by Just Energy Transition Partnership that emerged during COP27. Thank you for your attention, and we look forward to hearing from the distinguished speaker how we can enhance further collaboration between Africa and Asia in a sustainable manner. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kinoshita, for your insightful and very encouraging remarks to our important audiences. I'd like to move to the next session titled African Law in Global Natural Gas Market. So I'd like to welcome the Dr. Flaq Omar Ibrahim. Dr. Ibrahim assumed that the position of the Secretary General at the African Petroleum Producers Organization called APPO in January 2020. Until then, he was advisor on international energy relations to 4 successive ministers for petroleum resources of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. He was Nigeria's governor to the Vienna-based organization of the petroleum exporting country OPEC between 2015 and 2020, and executive board members at the Doha-based gas exporting countries forum, GECF, between 2015 to 2020. So Dr. Ibrahim, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Anna, and thank you to Africa Development Bank for organizing this, what promises to be a very fruitful dialogue that will set in motion, hopefully, a very good relationship between Africa and Asia in the oil and gas, in particular in the gas industry. Going through your concept note, I think you've captured everything that one needs to know about the theme of today's dialogue. And I think what I just need to add is that Africa today has the largest proportion of its population living with energy poverty. Over 600 million Africans live without access to electricity, and 900 without access to any form of modern energy for cooking or domestic heating. You'll also note that the emergence of Just Energy Partnership from COP27, JET Partnership are advocating the use of gas as a transition fuel. And of course, gas producing countries in Africa and elsewhere are pleased with this advocacy. The question that is not being asked is, did the advocates of JET Partnership, especially those from the industrialized countries of Europe and the Americas, just realize that the environmental credentials of gas are good enough to permit its continuous use for longer than oil? Or it is their concern about energy security occasioned by the Russian-Ukraine war that redefined how gas is seen in the energy transition agenda. With nearly 9% of proven global gas reserves and still growing at an estimated 3% per annum to 2050, and 6% of global production, Africa today exports some 70% of its crude oil and 45% of its gas. Given our experiences in huge findings in recent years, Africa looks poised to become a big player in the gas industry. As we discuss the new vision for Asia-Africa cooperation in natural gas, I believe it's important we are honest with each other and clearly express our concerns, not hiding them under some diplomatic correct language. The first is that Africa made some mistakes in its energy relations with the West. Those mistakes must not be repeated as it develops strong energy relations with Asia. In the nearly 3/4 of a century that African relations with the West has remained heavy, Africa has become heavily dependent on Western technology, on Western markets, and on Western finance to operate its oil and gas industry. We have remained exporters of raw materials and importers of industrial goods and services that are produced from the raw materials we export at cheap prices. A mutually beneficial long-term energy partnership between Africa and Asia should ensure the domestication of the technology and infrastructure of the development of the energy industry on the African continent. It should ensure that in the long run, Africa is able to raise the funds necessary for the operations of its energy industry. This partnership should explore means of supporting African investment and development institutions like the Africa Development Bank and the soon-to-be established Africa Energy Bank to develop the capacity to fund energy projects in the continent. The companies producing the technologies for the industry in Asia should consider opening branches in Africa to fabricate and do all that can be done on the African continent. These and others should be the foundation of any long-term mutually beneficial working relationship between Asia and Africa in the energy sector. Given what we have seen in the last few years, there is cause to believe that Africa can produce enough gas for its people and for export. This has always been a major concern between foreign investors and owners of resources. Are you investing in order to take all that you produce for your communities or societies, as we have experienced in the past with the West? Or we are going to be able to sit and say that we are going to go into a partnership that will be mutually benefiting to those who are coming with their finances, with their technology and everything, as well as those to whom these resources have been entrusted by God. To me, the conversations we are going to have today, and hopefully in the future in the course of this, should have at the back of its mind this building trust that will ensure a long-term, mutually beneficial working relationship. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ibrahim, for your brilliant suggestions about the way forward. And we would like to listen to you more in the discussion session. So now I welcome Ms. Nosizwe Nokwe Makamo. Ms. Nosizwe is an accomplished and result-driven business leader with success in leading substantial operations and projects. Her corporate governance knowledge has seen her serve both as an executive director and as a non-executive director on the boards of oils and gas, investment, and other financial institutions since 1999, bringing in-depth understanding, leadership, value and positive transformation to each company on whose board she has served. So Ms. Nokue Makano, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you, Yuna. I hope you can see and hear me properly. Thank you. Good morning to the participants, good morning and good afternoon to the participants. And also thank you very much to the African Development Bank for this invitation. Certainly we are living in extremely interesting times. We are faced with a confluence of very different things, different events, which are leading to a change in terms of the energy aspect and energy security globally. So I think this is a very exciting time to be living. And I also think that it's a very exciting time for Africa and for Asia, given, as I said, the confluence of events that have happened. Whilst people were busy trying to recover from the pandemic, a couple of things or a couple of events have taken place, which have led us to this situation where we have a global energy crisis. As I speak to you now from South Africa, I'm speaking, as I said earlier, I'm concerned about the fact that at any point, there could be load shedding happening, and therefore I might lose the signal. These are times that are unprecedented globally, because this is happening everywhere. As had been elucidated by the earlier speaker, we have 600 million Africans who are still living in energy poverty. And here we are as a continent sitting with huge fossil fuel potential. And this fossil fuel potential, not only is it oil, but it's also gas. Now, obviously, we are now sitting in the middle of this energy transition, which is conditioned by concerns about global warming and concerns about the use of fossil fuels. So Africa finds itself in a position where we need to develop the continent, we need to use the fossil fuels, the gas in particular as well, to develop the continent, and yet at the same and provide energy security and industrialize the countries. And yet we sit in a position where there is a energy transition, net zero by 2030 and 2050, towards 2050 net zero. So the question is, how can our resources, which I'm not going to go into the numbers, I'm sure most of the participants are aware what sort of volumes we are talking about that we have on the different countries on the continent. And I guess the question is, how can we be able to meet the rising demand from Asia right now, which has been, I think, estimated that it's going to double. The rising demand for LNG is going to double by 2040. How can we be able to access the Asian market, but also to be able to meet the challenges? So we have two types. We have challenges on the supply side, and we've got huge challenges as well on the demand side. On the supply side from the African continent, we've got issues of where in the timeline of project development are these projects. So we need to be able to develop our projects, because most of them are greenfield. There are some brownfield projects, but most of them are greenfield. How do we put in the infrastructure, overcome the challenges of the regional infrastructure for export, and how are we able to also access the market in Asia? So there needs to be a lot of collaborative discussions between the Asian countries and the African countries so that we can harmonize the challenges that we are facing. I'm aware that in China, there is a demand increase for LNG. We are also aware that in Japan, towards 2030, they're now reducing the requirement for LNG, I think, down to 20%. So we do see that even though there's a doubling of demand up to 2040, thereafter you start seeing it tapering off, which means that there's another challenge. The projects that can come to fruition are projects that have to be ready for execution. So we sit here with the resources, we sit in Africa with the resources, And in Asia, we sit with the demand. We need to be able, as the previous speaker mentioned, to match these two challenges that we are faced from both continents. But I think it's important that we recognize that there are gas hubs on the African continent. We have the gas hub, which is the East African gas hub, which has been mentioned, Mozambique, Tanzania, which obviously is a natural feeder into the Asian markets. So using, I think, this platform of the AFDB, and also using the collaborative collaboration that can exist between the different producing countries, using, as I said, the platform and the policy debate that can also ensue between the two countries. I think it's very important that we recognize that there are huge opportunities that we can exploit between, excuse me, between the two continents. So currently, the current focus is putting Africa's 2025 and 2030 output at about 340 BCM. So we are aware that currently a lot of the projects are sitting in a pre-FEED situation, and they do require massive greenfield investment for field development and for the LNG infrastructure. We therefore have to come up with very innovative financing mechanisms that can be perhaps different from the traditional financing mechanisms, but look at how we can use regional collaboration on the African continent and regional collaboration on the Asian side, so that we can be able to bring these projects to fruition. I'm sure when we go into more discussion, Yuna, later, we can be able to detail it. But I think the thrust from where we are sitting as the African Energy Chamber is to say there is a potential. Africa can actually have got the huge potential to be able to solve a lot of the demand issues. But on the other hand, we have the challenges of the infrastructure. So we need to come up with innovative solutions to be able to solve for the infrastructure development. I think I'll stop there. I was looking at my time. Yuna?
Yes, thank you so much, Ms. Nokoe Makamo, for your informative the suggestion and also the view for the future cooperation between the two regions. So let me now introduce the third speaker from Africa, Mr. Adli Kalafi. That Mr. Adli Kalafi is the Vice President of TAFA Arabia for Africa and New Ventures. He's focusing on developing the energy business in Africa and seeking a new opportunity to flourish the energy sector all over the continent. Before being appointed as TAFA Arabia Vice President, Africa and New Ventures, Mr. Adli was the general manager of Swed Electric Algeria, Tunisia, and Senegal. So, Mr. Kalafi, the floor is yours. Sir, you are muted. Please unmute yourself.
Thank you so much for the introduction and giving me the opportunity to join such an important event. We've been working in TAFA Arabia in the investment for the distribution of natural gas for the last 20 years. I just want to give you an overview about Africa and the consumption. I am a guy with an engineering background, so I like numbers. And I like to see numbers clearly in order to be able to identify the right opportunities. So in Egypt, we've been producing around 70 BCM. I will just give round figure numbers in order for the attendees to understand where I'm coming from. In Egypt, we're producing around 70 BCM, where we've been using around 60 to 62 BCM per year, okay? And till as we speak, where people have access to electricity for more than 90%, and we're using as well the natural gas in the distribution of in the transportation sector heavily into cars, into minibuses, into small buses, and even now we're using the natural gas for the heavy trucks as well. If we go to Nigeria, with a population bigger than Egypt, and with one of the highest reserves in Africa for the natural gas, in Nigeria they are producing more than 70 BCM, a little bit more than that, but they are exporting 70% or 80% of their natural gas. And the access of electricity over there, it's very weak. The transportation sector, they are importing diesel and gasoline in order to use in the transportation sector. They are paying 30 to 40 BCM per MMBTU to power the generators, while they are selling gas for much more lower than that energy. So it's not fair. If we go to Angola, they are exporting most of the natural gas in an energy form. What they are benefiting? Nothing. You have other models which are good as well. Algeria, they are the biggest producers today for the natural gas, but they are using most they are powering their power stations using the natural gas. They are using as well the natural gas for the transportation sector, so it is a good model. Okay, in Mozambique today they are producing. I will not talk about the northern production for the time being, but the good model about Mozambique, they used to produce for the last 20 years around 5 BCM, where 1 BCM was used locally by for the generation of electricity and even in the transportation sector. While part of their production is going to South Africa, which is good. So Africans are supporting each other. Okay. Today we've seen a big exploration around Africa. Mauritania, they have natural gas. Ghana, they have natural gas. Senegal, they have natural gas. Namibia, they have big exploration. Tanzania, they have big exploration. Now, it is the time to make the right policy for the Africans, to utilize their natural gas properly. We were not the ones that are responsible for the carbon dioxide emission, but we're still paying for that. What we need to do clearly is to make sure that we utilize the natural gas, as my colleagues were saying previously in the talking, that we need to make sure that we will be utilizing natural gas for the consumption of Africans, okay, supporting each other. And I see the opportunity coming in the collaboration with Asia to put a new direction in, let's invest in Africa, okay, making sure they are utilizing their natural gas and exporting for Asia whatever is needed for them to develop their countries as well, and to make sure that everything will continue right smoothly. But I think myself, I will be fighting for that. We will not accept anymore that we will be just sending our energy with the lowest value addition possible and buying alternative fuel and alternative energy sources, okay, for 5 times or 8 times the price that we are selling our energy with. So that this is I know that I'm a little bit tough, but we have done a successful model as Saudi Arabia and Egypt as a private sector to support the Egyptian government for the last 20 years, connecting more than 1.5 million clients to the natural gas grid. We have been converting cars to work with the natural gas, because this is the resource that we have. This is what we own in Egypt. And then we were exporting the rest. But first, we'll have to make sure that we can do them in parallel. And if we can do them in parallel, we can invest, but we should have a vision. We should have regulation for that. We cannot just simply invest in taking the gas out and that's it. So sorry for making the long. I took just 2 minutes extra. So, but I wanted to share my point of view with some numbers. So even if someone, I know that most of the attendees and the speakers, they for sure they know and they have seen this similar as myself. But as I've been involved in the kitchen for a long time, so I feel they had an obligation to speak about it and to inform everyone about it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vice President Mr. Kafafi, for this strong suggestion and also the insightful presentation. The African Development Bank will host the upcoming the bank's annual meetings in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt next week. So we will also in touch this topic during the annual meeting with various parties. So this is a timely important event. For both African and also Asian stakeholder. That's why we are holding this event before our big annual event. So let me move to the last speaker from the Africa region. Actually, he's our big boss, Mr. Badji Balde. Mr. Badji Balde has over 36 years of professional experience across the power value chain and financing capital structure. He is the Director of Power System Development at the African Development Bank since May 2017. Prior to joining AFDB, Mr. Balde was the Director of Power Business Investment Division at the Africa Finance Corporation called AFC. He has also been a consultant to the World Bank, European Union, and Biz-Cayman government of Lesotho, and he was the pioneer managing director of Gambia's National Water and Electricity Company between 1995 and 1999. So the Director Balde, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much for those remarks. I think I'll just build on what has been said and just give the global context where we have a trilemma of challenges. The first one being energy challenge in terms of availability, affordability, quality, reliability, and security of energy supplies, especially in the face of threats posed by climate change. The second challenge is the development challenge in terms of low growth rates, high poverty levels, aggravated growing debt, rising interest rates, and constrained fiscal space in many countries, increasing economic uncertainties and risks. The last challenge is a security challenge arising from a confluence of factors such as climate change, youth employment, etc., etc. So ADB, I would say the strategy is very simple. We have what we call the high fives. And high five number one is light up and power Africa, because without power or energy, if you cannot have economic development. And that has to drive the other high fives. Feed Africa, you need energy for that. Fertilizers and gas plays a very important role in that value chain. Industrialize Africa across all industries. But more importantly, I would say gas to power in terms of displacing coal and heavy fuels, and also in the transportation sector in terms of CNG, etc., etc. And then regional integration. We've had some regions have a lot of renewable energy endowments and gas endowments, others don't. So you really need the power and gas interconnections for regions with excess energy and gas to be able to trade with other regions as they transition to cleaner and more sustainable green growth. And last but not the least, you need to make sure that the climate change imperatives are balanced with the requirements for energy security. And before COP26, gas was not seen. We have been consistent in ADB that gas is a transition fuel. In fact, it's an enabler for renewable energy, especially at the national or regional regions. And we have a program called Desert to Power, which will result in the largest solar zone. We have funded the largest solar projects that are on grid, like Wazazat, and also the largest wind farm on the continent, like Lake Turkana. So what I'm trying to say is we know what needs to be done. So our job really as a bank is to support our member countries to create the policy framework and regulatory environment that will maximize or attract the investments, both public and private, to make sure we transition to greener growth. The needs for the transition will require about $100 billion per annum. And we keep hearing there's a lot of finance, but the problem is bankable projects and the structuring. So this is where ADB is uniquely positioned to be able to bring together actors, convene the parties, and we have various platforms for that. Annual meeting will be the latest, but you're aware of the Africa Energy Marketplace, where we bring a group of countries to look at energy projects, and also our Africa Investment Forum, mainly for private sector actors. So I think the message I want to leave is the key thing to access finance. Money is a coward. It takes the path of least resistance, whether it's public or private. So the governments need to play their role, which they are doing, and we are supporting them. And the private sector also must play their role so that whatever investments we achieve are mutually beneficial in the short term, in the medium term, and in the long term. The past will not be acceptable anymore, where we export value and jobs, whilst we are suffering and have deficits in our countries. So in terms of accessing this finance, what will be important really is to understand what Paris alignment means, because increasingly MDBs will not finance projects that are not Paris aligned. And in order to be Paris aligned, we have to understand certain concepts. And the first concept is the concept of differentiated pathways, where African countries are allowed under the Paris Agreement to peak later and achieve net zero later than developed countries. So for example, China will peak, I think, by 2030 and reach net zero by 2060, etc. And in doing so, you must develop least cost integrated sector plans, whether it's power, transport, industry, or whatever. And it is those least cost integrated plans that will feed into long-term strategies of countries. And it is those long-term strategies that will inform their nationally determined contributions in terms of adaptation. And then projects in those NDCs are now automatically Paris aligned because they've been classified as such. And the bank will fund projects that are Paris aligned. However, adaptation is a bigger problem for Africa because we contribute less than 4% of the emissions. So we would like to focus on also prioritize adaptation as we transition to greener growth, whilst not compromising our development imperatives. Also, another area that the gas value chain will become critical is clean cooking. People still use firewood, which is unacceptable, whereas they can use cheap electricity in countries that can produce electricity cheaply, or more importantly, they can use LPG. For transportation also, rather than using diesel or petrol, you can use CNG, for example, for transportation. And we have models on the continent that we can build upon. And this South-South collaboration, actually, it has already started. We have collaboration on the power pool levels, and the gas level, where countries that are successful with successful models support other countries that are less successful. And Paris alignment also means that that $100 billion per annum that has been promised for the past 10 decades or so and still not in view, it will be critical to access finance. So we as ADB, we lead the advocacy, the policy dialogue to make sure we attract and mobilize climate finance at scale. And developed countries, we have to cough up that. Second issue, technology transfer. The technology exists, but it makes no sense to transport raw materials thousands of kilometers away and then import, finished goods, when the same goods could be produced locally to meet local demand and the excess exported. And again, policy imperatives in terms of, say, gas domestic obligations. You must meet local gas demands or energy demand before you export. This is simple. The penalties for flaring also must be so punitive that it makes more sense for investors to not flare. So these are some of the simple things. And lastly is technical assistance and capacity building, where the skill sets required right across from the governance level, across the gas value chain are developed in terms of policy making, regulation, investment professionals, engineers, and all other support services. I think there's a lot of scope for, should I say, prioritizing the priorities and then having very clear targets and big projects that we can work together on. Lastly, the conventional approach of project finance will not work. Because if you're talking about, well, in the oil and gas, LNG projects are being financed by the private sector. But when you now come to structure gas to power at the regional level, requiring billions of dollars, it becomes a bit challenging. And so new ways of preparing these projects, de-risking them, structuring them, will have to be looked at. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Director Badji Balde, for sharing the African Development Bank's overall and various perspective, strategy, and insight of view. It was a really knowledgeable presentation. I believe many of our participants learn a lot about the AFDB's function and then the way forward. So now let us move to the next session. It is the session titled "The Activities of Asian Stakeholders in Africa Gas Industry." Mr. Jong-gun Lee is the General Manager of Overseas Engineering Business Team of Korea Gas Technology Corporation. Mr. Lee has over 20 years working experience in gas sector with extensive project experience covering Korea, Vietnam, Thailand, Ghana, Singapore, China, and so on. So I welcome Mr. Jong-gun Lee. So Jong-gun Lee, please take the floor.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, hello. Yeah, good afternoon. Yeah, my name is Jong-gun Lee from Korea Gas Technology Corporation. I'm in charge of the overseas engineering business, and I've been working for Korea Gas Tech over 20 years. It's a great honor to join as one of the speakers for the policy dialogue, which is a new vision Asia Africa Corporation on natural gas. Therefore, I prepared for my present material. So, yeah, this is my present material. So, natural gas application for Africa based on Korea Gas Technology track records. So, my presentation consists of the two main parts. First of all, I'm gonna briefly introduce my company introduction. And second one is a natural gas application in Africa continent. So my company's major business is from the very beginning to the end. So we can provide for the consulting services as a feasibility study, FEED, and PMC. And also we're gonna cover the EPC works for the LNG facilities, also O&M business. So I believe that Costech is a total solution provider with expertise in the gas field. This is our experience in the worldwide. Yeah, this is the main part for the natural gas application. So the audience and the participant very familiar with the LNG, I think. So yeah, let me briefly introduce the LNG terminal in Korean Peninsula. So we have the over 7 and 8 of the LNG terminals in Korean Peninsula. Also, this is overview of the LNG terminal. This is a key facilities of the energy terminal as the energy storage tank. This is the experience for the basic and detailed engineering in Arjun, Kuwait. This is the natural gas transmission networks in Korean Peninsula. You can see total length of the pipeline is over than the 4,900 kilometers, and the distribution station is more than 400 units. So each terminal could provide the natural gas to the end user. This is a small-scale LNG supply system for a power plant. So it's a remote area. We can provide the LNG to the remote area, like the island. So it's one of the example for the small scale. So LNG is come from each energy terminal by using a tanker lorry to transport to the ship. And finally, we can provide the natural gas, the LNG, to the power plant in Baekneung Island. So this is one of the example to install the remote area of the LNG. Next one is the mobile LNG liquefaction plant. So we call a container type, small scale LNG liquefaction package. So all equipment are installed the container, just 40 feet, and we can provide 15 ton per day capacity. So we can install this mobile liquefaction plant as a parallelly, so we can increase for the capacity. This is LCNG and the CNG supply station for the public transportation. So you can see, such as like the small scale LNG supply system, almost same as all. This is by using the LNG, the cold energy. The LNG is the minus 162 Celsius degree. So at that time, you can use for those kind of the cold energy to the refrigerator warehouse. So this is a very good example for the African continent. So we can provide the super frozen and the frozen and something like that kind of the refrigerator warehouse. This is one of the good example for the cooperation between Africa and Korea. We already done for the feeder services for the New Star terminal in Ghana. At the time, we provide for the feeder services for the pipeline or the Gabana station to the New Star terminal. So this is the cooperation. So if you have any question, let me know after I finish my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jong-gun Lee, for the practical and the informative presentation. And it gives us the maybe new information on this sector. So thank you once again. Let me move to the second speaker from Japan, Mr. Yosuke Noguchi. Mr. Yosuke Noguchi is working for Research and Analysis Department at the Japan Organization for Metals and Energy Security called JOGMEC. Mr. Noguchi is a researcher in charge of Africa and Qatar at the JOGMEC. He has been conducting research in Africa ever since he joined the JOGMEC. He also doubles as a member of the LNG information team, where he's in charge of research related to the global gas and LNG inventory information, survey on destination clouds and price in LNG sales and purchase agreement and survey on LNG handling volume by Japanese companies. So I'd like to welcome Mr. Noguchi. So Mr. Noguchi, the floor is yours now.
Thank you very much for your introduction. My name is Yosuke from JOGMEC. It is my great pleasure to speak to you at this outstanding event. Okay, so okay. First, I'd like to introduce JOGMEC. JOGMEC is one of the governmental organization, and we aim to secure a stable supply of energy and resources by supporting oil and gas development, metal and coal mining, geothermal development, and oil and metal stockpiling, and mine pollution control. Last year, we added functions and capabilities of financial assistance for production and storage of hydrogen and ammonia, as well as for CCS and geological structure survey for offshore wind power generation. And we have provided assistance in African natural gas, particularly in Eastern Africa. We have also been involved in many projects in coal and metals. Let me move on to the natural gas and LNG market. First is the price. If we see the chart closer, it is clear that we are starting to face the risk of price spikes in the spot market. Looking at the period from December 2020, record highs have been reached 5 times in 2 years. And next, we look at supply and demand. It can be seen that Asia will be the demand center in the future, and that the liquefaction business will become increasingly dependent on the United States. On the other hand, LNG supply from Mozambique and the rest of Africa, it shows light blue, is also expected to increase. Third, we will look at the world, Africa, and the position of natural gas. The red triangle indicates energy trilemma. The green triangle indicates 3E trilemma. And the light blue square is shown as African tetralemma. In the world, our goal is to coordinate affordability, energy security, and environmental sustainability in the midst of the energy trilemma. However, I believe that Africa needs to take another perspective of economic growth. In my opinion, Africa is in a difficult position for just energy transition, where it needs to balance the 4 perspectives in the energy trilemma and 3E trilemma. In this context, natural gas is an extremely important resource, not only within Africa, but also for Asia, due to its stable supply and environmental advantages. This slide shows the position of African LNG for Asia and Japan. From a Japanese perspective, Japan imported 19.7% of its LNG from Asia and Oceania last month. From an Asian perspective, Asia imports 85.5% of its LNG from Oceania and the United States last month. Volume of LNG imports from Africa has been decreasing, especially since the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And the degree of dependence on Africa has also been decreasing, but but Asian LNG demand will increase. On the other hand, Africa is emerging as a supplier, and as explained in the previous slide, Africa and Asia, also Japan, will be matched in terms of security by diversifying supply sources. However, the physical distance between the two regions make it necessary to keep a close eyes on their economic viability. This is last slide. GeoGMEC are currently investing in a project in Mozambique, where many Asian companies are participating. It is also believed that some of the LNG will flow to Asia to meet the demand. We will continue to invest in LNG, hydrogen, and ammonia projects in Africa and hope to deepen the relationship between Africa and Asia. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yosuke Noguchi, for sharing the informative figures and also good suggestion about the way forward between Asia and Africa cooperation. And we would like to listen to you more during the Q&A and also discussion session. So let me move to the third speaker from China, and Mr. Lu Luquan. Mr. Lu Luquan is the president of China National Petroleum Corporation, called CNPC, Economics and Technology Research Institute, CNPC ETRI. And he is the deputy director of CNPC Research Center of China top think tanks. Since 2006, Mr. Lu has been mainly engaged in research on strategic management, energy policy, management reform, energy transition, and the Belt and Road Initiative. Mr. Lu has published more than 200 papers or articles on international relations, energy geopolitics, and enterprise internationalization, as well as strategy and management, and so on. So it's an honor to welcome Mr. Lu. Mr. Lu, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Okay, thank you. So good morning and good afternoon to all the participants. It's my honor to be here to share my viewpoints on the China-Africa natural gas and LNG sector. And actually, I myself was working in Africa, in Sudan, oil project for a couple of years, almost 15 years ago. However, it is a pity that now currently Sudan is in chaos. It's in the situation of the military confrontation. So it's really a pity, and it is a sad story. However, we still have a hope. Our hope is in the future, in the energy transition, and also the natural gas and LNG, the relatively clean energy in Africa, and between the Africa with the China and East Asia market. So for the currently, generally that for the China-Africa Natural Gas Corporation, actually we have almost more than 15 years cooperation, and our roadmap in Africa, that is, I mean, our China enterprises start from let's say the trade, international trade, and then from international trade to the FDI for the investment. So here you can see that the big milestone is that for my parent company, our parent company, CNPC, was participating in the area blocks 4 in Mozambique. We know that about 10 years ago in Mozambique, in the Eastern Africa, that a huge scale of natural gas, a water scale discovery in Mozambique and Tanzania. And so we participate, next one, please. Okay. So we participate in that project. We buy more than 20% shares from ENI, and now we are one of the partners in that big joint venture operated by ENI, ExxonMobil, and CNPC. And it is a good news that last November, the project put the first stage now is put into operation. Now is very beneficial to the local economic development, and now more than 3 million tons of LNG will put into the market, and to give a value-added effort to the whole African natural gas and LNG development. And according to the project plan, that is the plateau production will more than 30 million tons. That is a huge project, and tens of billions of US dollars investment. So it is a big chance for CNPC and for other Chinese oil and gas companies to be involved in Africa natural gas and exploration, production, and international trading. Okay, next one. So what about the future? And what about? I think now you know that I think for Africa, you should have a balanced way to do to balance between the energy transition and also the local development and industrialization, and to try to solve the energy poverty. You know, we know that now the carbon peak and the carbon neutrality, also the net zero to some degree is a little bit political right. For my own opinion, and according to my working experience in Africa, that I think the first priority for Africa is to development, to try to resolve the energy poverty. So in the future, one hand is try to get the overseas investment, try to make a better policy, and try to create a good environment to attract the investment from the overseas, especially from the Asian oil and gas companies. Okay, and to put the project in the core, and to let's say to according to make full use of the budget, and to provide the high quality projects, and to produce the natural gas and LNG. But on the other hand is try to participate in the energy transition. For the natural and gas sector, that is also for LNG. Let's say my suggestion is to take the way of gas plus. Let's say the gas plus CCS and the CCUS, okay, and also the gas plus the electrification. You know, the electrification rate in the Africa is very low. So make full use of the natural gas to have a gas power generation plant in the Africa, and also the gas and the gas plus the hydrogen. You know, gas is a very good raw material to produce the blue hydrogen. So it's really a very practical way to get the twin goals. One is the development and economic growth, and also the industrialization. Another way is to try to pick up, try to be let's say carbon neutral according to every country's own plan. That's all for my sharing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, President Liu, for the great presentation, and also the sharing your views, and then the cooperation that we can do together. And it's a great honor to have you for this event once again. Thank you so much. And I would like to hear more from you during the discussion session. And now is the last speaker from Asia region. And let me invite once again the Professor Yongshong Wang from CAS. Mr. Professor Wang.
Can you hear me?
Yes, finally, yes, very well. Please take
Okay,
the floor.
thank you. Yeah, great. So, so thank you for the kind invitation. So I want to share my views in terms of in the perspective of the comparative, the European and the Asian countries. So you know that the European and Europe and the Asia are the two big, maybe two big demand for the Africa's natural gas. So I want to share 4 points. So the one point that the Africa, so under the current situation of the Ukraine crisis, so the Africa's the status in the global natural gas supply will rise. So the reason is that the first one is that so now the European countries yes has substantially reduced the import of the pipeline gas from the Russia. So they want to reduce about by 85% of gas from Russia. So so the European countries, they want to look forward alternative the supply. So and the United States, so is the main source. But compared to the United States, so the African countries, so they have the distance is much short. So I see that the cost or shipping cost may be lower compared to the United States, the US LNG. So this is the one reason. A second reason is that so for Russia, so yeah, so because the Russia's the LNG the gas export to the European countries, so so for Russia is quite difficult for it to find alternative market. So you know that if Russia need to increase its export, the gas export to the Asian market, so it needs to build new platform to build new pipelines. So also they construct a new ship. So it's time consuming. So for short term, so the Russia is quite hard to increase substantially its gas export to the Asia. And then the third reason is that so now we can see that in this past winter, so the European countries, they have luckily the past the worst times because of in this winter, because of the warm winter. But even though the European countries, so they increase increase investment in building the terminals and also the construct ship, but also the gas deposit increase, but they cannot solve the problem of the crisis. Maybe if they have experience the extreme weather, for example, hot or cold weather. So this means that they are in provide incentive for the European countries to increase investment in the Africa. So this is good for the African country to increase to attract the capital from European countries. And the second point is that in terms of, I want to discuss about the Asia and the Africa in terms of trade, in terms of the import. So African countries are emerging gas suppliers for of Asian countries. So according to the BP's statistics in 2021, and Asian countries import about 22 billions cubic meters LNG from African countries. So the share in its import is around 6.2. So just not big, just quite small. So and the European country import about 32 the billion cubic meters from African countries. So in the share of its share is around 30% in its LNG import. So we know that in last year, so the European countries substantially increased its import from African countries. So that means that I think there's a big gap between the European country and Asia. So this means that in other aspects, it means that so the Asian countries have not the potential to increase its import from African countries. In terms of the investment, the direct investment. So we know that Asia countries include China. So we have in the past they have a big amount of investment in in direct investment, including the oil and gas. So for China, we in the 2020, so China we have invest around more than $20 billion investment in the continent. Also for greenfield investment in the so China also we have around $20 billion for the contract greenfield investment, particularly around 20% of the investment in the allocated in the oil and gas, so of course including the CNPC. And the fourth point is that so even though now they have a big gap between the Asia country and the Europe, so but for long term, so the Asia countries have much potential to increase its energy, the LNG import from the African countries. There are two reasons. So one full reason is that in the short term, although the European country can increase substantially the LNG import, but now I see that so in the near future, so with the rapid increase in the investment in the renewable energy, in the wind, in the solar, so European countries will soon reach its peak in their gas consumption or in their gas import, maybe in the next 5 or 10 years. But for the Asian countries, so Asian countries they have a lot. So China will our demand for the oil will reach peak in 2030. Maybe our demand for the gas maybe reach peak in 2035. So another country like India, so they have large potential to increase its energy and also gas the consumption. So this means that for Asian countries, you will need more years to reach energy peak. So this means that also you know that comparing to the European countries, Asian countries, the industrial structure, the economy, they more depends on the manufacturing sectors or a heavy manufacturing industry. So means that their economy, Asian economy is energy intensive or carbon intensive. So they are more intense. So they have more potential for Asian countries to increase the gas consumption and the energy import from the African countries. So this is my my views. So I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Wang, for sharing your view and suggestion, especially the informative information and the history behind. And we would like to listen to you more, during the, discussion session. So before we move to the panel discussion, which is the most, excited session, I would like to invite our big boss, Dr. Vanessa Ushi, who is the acting director and leading the African Natural Resources Management and Investment Center, with the responsibility for the center's strategic agenda, knowledge, activities, programs, and interventions. The center supports the AFDB's regional member countries to harness their natural resources for sustainable development. And so I would like to give a floor to Vanessa to hear her view and suggestion briefly.
Okay.
Dr. Ushi.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Yuna. Good morning, good afternoon to all our participants from across the world. And good morning, colleagues. So it's been a very interesting discussion. Unfortunately, I couldn't join earlier, but I listened to all the experts from Africa and Asia, and it's quite intriguing. For us in the AFDB, of course, now the bank is focusing more on valorization of Africa's natural resources. We want to add value in Africa. I think historically, Africa has focused more on exports of raw commodities, and this is why we talk about the Dutch disease and the resource curse. So what the bank is saying now is that we need to focus more on adding value, beneficiation, franchising, and using our natural resources to build industrial capacity in Africa. So this conversation is very timely, it's very pertinent, and it's really aligned with the direction that the bank is going. So a few thoughts which I've gained from listening to all the expert views. I think in the short to medium term, there is an opportunity for Africa to increase its exports of natural gas to Asia. We've seen predictions of rising demand in Africa due to population growth and industrialization as well, and also increasing demand from Asia. So there is a potential win-win situation, and this calls for smart partnerships, because we want to have partnerships which work for Africa, not those which we would say are really exporting raw materials without creating any value. So I think this is an opportunity in the short and medium term, because we've seen geopolitical factors such as the Russia invasion of Ukraine last year, which has disrupted gas markets, and many countries are looking for alternative sources of supply of energy. So African countries can position themselves to really help address energy security, not just in Africa, but for other important countries and industrialized economies. But there are some challenges. I think in the long term, we look at fossil fuels and we understand that climate change and the commitments which African countries have made under the Paris agreements require some type of transition. So we talk about a just transition and the needs for us to decarbonize our economies. We are calling for a just energy transition, to say that Africa will do this at its own pace. But there are still some risks in the long term, what we call carbon lock-in, because we see that commodity demand is volatile. So it's important that we have plans of how these types of investments can also be aligned with the long-term trajectory globally and also Africa's internal priorities. So there's some risk from carbon lock-in and also some new policies such as the EU carbon border adjustment mechanism, which could penalize fossil fuel exporters in the long term. So there are short and medium term opportunities, but also the longer term, there are some risks, and we need to weigh all of these in making investment decisions. I think there are some building blocks of what a good partnership or gas plan would have, and these include having a high focus on inclusivity. It should be inclusive and sustainable. We should focus on regional cooperation between African countries because the economies of scale and transaction costs can be minimized at the regional level. And also looking at how we can improve governance of the sector, because we talk about corruption, transparency, and accountability. Even if we're diversifying our sources of cooperation with other partners outside of Africa, we still need to ensure that there is good governance of gas. I think it's very interesting listening to the speaker from China, looking at Africa now and how we're focused more actually on the global south in terms of our development cooperation. It wasn't this way 10, 15 years ago. So there is scope to really build deeper economic relationships with Asia, with China, South Korea, and other Asian powerhouses. We can learn from the experiences. If you look at late industrializing nations, they have some peculiar characteristics. They focus on learning by doing, producing for export markets, backward integration, and all of these are very important lessons for late industrializing nations, including Africa, which has ambitions of moving up the value chain and achieving industrialization. I think, as other speakers have mentioned, we can also focus on how we actually have very good partnerships, ensuring that these are aligned to our own internal objectives and priorities. And there is scope for even value addition in Africa. The level of domestic gas use, aside from North Africa, is still very low. So yes, we can invest in natural gas infrastructure, but this will require mobilizing capital. So for us as a bank and for other financiers, how we can contribute to actually developing new financing mechanisms for investing in gas to de-risk these investments and attract more private sector finance into gas infrastructure, because we have foreseen a growth in demand, and this is due to population growth and urbanization, as I said previously. So I think for me, it's about weighing short-term opportunities, long-term risks, how we can find a good balance, ensuring that Africa's needs are met, learning from our past mistakes. So we don't want to replace one type of commodity dependence for another type. This is why the bank is saying Africa needs to valorize, Africa needs to move up the value chain. This is our strategic approach for all commodities, including natural gas. So we actually want to move away from seeing natural resources as commodities and seeing them more as services. So what types of services do these natural assets provide? So we talk about natural capital. And I think really we need to move beyond commodity dependence. So this will require fresh thinking, innovation, and new models. And it's really exciting to hear from our partners in Asia just how much potential they see in building that relationship with Africa. So in a nutshell, as I said, we need to learn from the past, avoid making the same mistakes. We should be pragmatic. Obviously, the world is changing. And although we talk about a just transition, we are responsible. So we cannot take decisions which would hurt us as a continent in the future. So balancing opportunities, risks, ensuring that everyone is carried along. That means there's good governance, not just for governments, for communities, and these benefits are really invested in sustainable development. So I think we have an opportunity now to seize the moment. The world is really very different from what it was some years back, and quite dynamic as well. So many geopolitical changes. So it could be Africa's moment, but we need to think differently and really bring some new ideas to the fore. So I really thank the Asia External Representation Office and our colleagues in the Power and Energy Complex, Mr. Balde, and all our partners for this very interesting discussion. And let me leave it there for the panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Vanessa Ussi, for sharing your view, and also you reminded us the purpose of this very first event, purpose and objective, and expected output. for this very first event between, the Asia and Africa Cooperation. Although this is the event, but we will also plan to organize another event in the second half of the year at the second edition. And then ultimately, we would like to raise the awareness among the African and Asian public and experts. And also we wanted to create the platform for dialogue between the AFDB, Asian scholars and private sector and policymakers to share views on natural gas development together, what we can do. So yes, it's a very important, the comment provided by the Director Vanessa Usi. So let's move to the last session, which is very important. The panel discussion, Asia-Africa Natural Gas Industry Cooperation. This session will be moderated by my dear colleagues, Mr. Charles Nirakuhuku. Mr. Charles is the Chief Gas Sector Officer at the African Natural Resource Management and Investment Center at the African Development Bank. He has over 20 years experience in policy advisory, business development, strategy design, and catalyzing private investment in the petroleum, bioenergy, and then infrastructure project. Charles, the floor is yours, and then please lead the session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Yuna, and welcome to our distinguished panelists to this session. We have learned a lot through the speaker's presentation. Really, this is time for Africa to develop a new vision for Asia-Africa collaboration on natural gas. I've noted a few takeaways from the very exciting presentation by Vanessa. As we discuss the new vision, let's think about our short-term opportunities and balance them with the long-term risks for natural gas. Important for us to learn from past mistakes and move from commodities to services, and finally address the issue around funding and capital. So in a nutshell, those are the few takeaways from the conversation. I would like to move on with the panel discussion. I will start with Dr. Omar Farouk, who is the Secretary General for the Africa Petroleum Producers Organization. I would like to get the perspective from Dr. Farouk about how does he see Apple playing a role in confronting the challenges posed in the oil and gas industry by the energy transition, and in particular, the challenge regarding funding the sector. Dr. Farouk, the floor is yours. You are muted, Dr. Farouk. Can you unmute yourself? Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Charles. And what I was saying was that I believe you really hit the nail right on the head on the challenges really that face Africa on the oil and gas scene, especially with the energy transition. Funding has been one of the biggest challenges to the industry in Africa, especially in the light of the challenges posed by energy transition. And sometimes I ask myself, really, development financial institutions like the African Development Bank, whether they shouldn't think and behave like what Apple is doing today. We are focusing on the development of energy infrastructure on the African continent. And our major focus is not just the countries, but infrastructure that cut across countries and regions. Our biggest problem on the continent really has been this silo mentality of development within countries. And we want to talk about regional development or continental development when there are no infrastructure that cut across countries. This is a big challenge, and Apple has recognized this, and Apple is not just lamenting, but actually working on this. We are today working with the Afrexim Bank to establish the Africa Energy Bank, the objective of which is to ensure that in the absence of funding from the traditional financiers of African oil and gas industry, namely the international oil companies, Western financial institutions, and others, we will be able to fund this project, because we cannot allow over 125 billion barrels of oil and over 600 trillion cubic feet of proven gas in our continent to go waste, to be called stranded assets. This is why we believe that we are on the right path, and institutions like the African Development Bank, Afrexim, should also come in and see that the basic infrastructure for oil and gas technology and development on the African continent are developed. And this should be done not just within countries, but across countries. That's exactly what we're working on now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Farouk, for sharing some insights. We have noted the initiative by Apple and Afrexim Bank to set the Africa Energy Bank. We may come back to that in the Q&A, because this is really an emerging initiative which could contribute to addressing the funding gap. Let me move to the next panel. I'm gonna turn to Ms. Nosizwe. Ms. Nosizwe, you had a very, very passionate presentation on how the Africa Energy Chamber considers the way forward for natural gas in the development with Asia. So what do you see as the big challenges for Africa becoming an LNG export hub to Asia? Because Asia is emerging really as a big market, and LNG obviously is the most viable way for Africa to export its gas. So what are, in your view, the key challenges Africa needs to address to become an LNG hub for Asia? Ms. Nosizwe?
Thank you, Charles. Excuse my voice once again. I hope you can see and hear me.
Yeah. Yes, we do.
Okay, good. Thank you, Charles. If we look at 2022, we noticed that the prices of gas, they hit record levels in Asia. And what that did is that it dipped demand by about 7%, and it stalled some of the proposed projects. I mean, if you can recall, the prices averaged about $34 per BTU, and the largest drop in terms of demand was in China. So from the demand side, you've got the issue of the price volatility, and in fact, just the volatility of the LNG market. That also caused Japan to do a de-risking strategy, where they started to look at their looking at restarting their nuclear plants and looking at that fleet so that they can reduce the exposure to the volatile gas market. On the other hand, Africa is faced with the following problem. most of the projects which are on the African continent, which are proven reserves, unfortunately are still in a pre-feed or feed level. And they require massive greenfield investments for the field development of the LNG, export infrastructure and distribution infrastructure within the company to take place. So the issue is, on the one side, you've got the demand, which is, even though it was set to double, you can see that because of the price volatility, people started to de-risking this issue of price volatility. On the other hand, you've got the greenfield supply aspect, which is the African continent, who are faced with having to invest this amount of money in greenfields and in some cases brownfields. That is a huge challenge, where at some point there has to be a balancing of the supply challenge which Africa is faced with, especially the new projects along the East African coast, and what the price is going to be doing going forward, which nobody can actually quite put a handle on given the volatility of the LNG market. So that's one thing. And an earlier speaker also mentioned the issue of regionalization of the supply issue, so that you're regionalized to your markets and you're not working in a silo. So if we can have regionalization of the supply factors, that will go a long way as well in trying to de-risk some of these issues. So it's quite a serious challenge, given what most of the policies, remember these things are policy driven, what the policies are on the Asian side in terms of what are they going to be doing towards net zero, and the timing of when these projects can come on board to be able to address this. So there has to be a lot of collaborative discussions which are going to open up the opportunities, because given these two very serious challenges that are faced by the African LNG producing countries. I'll leave it at that for now, Charles. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Nokwe Makamo, for the insight, and this is quite true. All is about balancing supply and demand, and also looking at a long-term view when it comes to project development, how we de-risk those projects given market constraint and volatility. Allow me to go to
Charles. Charles, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention one important thing. You know that the contracting system has also changed. Before, there were long-term contracts, but now people are looking towards more shorter-term contracting time. Mm-hmm. And that short-term contracting time is also a de-risking mechanism. And that short contracting time is also not acceptable to project financiers. They want a longer contracting time. So what's happening in the market and what's happening on the finance side is another issue, another place where there needs to be some collaborative discussions in terms of how does each side be able to de-risk what they see as a big risk for themselves. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for these remarks. Let me move to our next speaker, who is Engineer Ali Kafafi from Dhaka. Engineer Kafafi, are you online?
Yes.
You have presented Egypt's experience in using natural gas, and highlighted some of the challenges, also the pitfalls some of other African gas countries have encountered. So I'd like to hear a bit of your experience on the benefits of natural gas utilization, and what are the key lessons Egypt can share with the rest of gas producers on the continent.
Thank you for your question. Egypt actually had an excellent success story In the beginning, Egypt was struggling in connecting different industries with natural gas. For the first 20 years, between 1980 and 2000, we used to connect per year not more than 50,000 clients. And we had a very poor connection to the industries, and a very challenging connection to the power producers. This is what the government, they decided that they cannot do it alone. You cannot focus on big things and small things at the first time. I used to have my first boss who was telling me this. You cannot play all the roles. You must ask for help and you must ask for support. This is where the government, with the Ministry of Petroleum and everyone, decided to build up a strong regulatory body and distribute the business among the international and private sector companies. So they divided Egypt into concession areas, and they called for investors to come and invest in the distribution of natural gas. And this is exactly what happened. And TOCA was one of the companies that decided to invest in the distribution. Of course, imagine you would go to connect a final consumer with a connection which is $200 connection. It's nothing, but and it needs a lot of work. TOCA today, we have more than 3,500 employees that works in TOCA. We moved with this, I would say, smart move that took Egypt to another level, from 50,000 connection a year up to 1.2 million connection a year. So what was the result? The result that instead of getting an LPG for 5 times the price of natural gas, we invested a little bit. We called the investors to come, and the local investors to join the government in putting more infrastructure for the distribution of natural gas. And after 20 years, I would say we succeeded. We have more than 15 million houses connected to natural gas.
Yeah.
So the industries in Egypt are connected to natural gas. Most of the power plants are connected to natural gas, and the government didn't say, okay, this is a power generating facility, do not connect it, I will connect it to take most of the load, and this is an industrial park, no, just leave it for me as a government to do it. No, they distributed fairly among the companies that were ready to invest in Egypt, and this is how we succeeded connecting everyone with natural gas, and now we're even exporting the surplus that we're having. And this is what I would say, that is my advice for the African countries in collaboration with the Asian countries. Yeah. We cannot do it alone in Africa. Come join us, invest with us in Africa. Let's invest in building a strong network in Africa, and you will never regret it. And
thank you very much, Mr. You allow me to, I know you are very passionate about this, but we are running short of time. If there are any follow-up questions, I think they can, a participant can reach out to the speakers anytime. Thank you, Mr. Kalafi, for that. Let me move to the next. Director Bachi Baldes, we heard about the bank's, perspective and support in the power sector, and some of the insights about how gas projects should be Paris aligned and contribute ultimately to industrialization and broadly attaining the bank high five objectives. So this is very, very useful. Would you share a bit with the participants what would be the role of, what is actually the role of the bank in supporting African countries harness the potential of natural gas? Keeping in mind that the global economy is actually being decarbonized, and the challenges you have mentioned about the trilemma, how do we balance affordability, sustainability, security, and still be able to steer a vision for natural gas with a central role of the African Development Bank in the equation. Would you share with us a bit more on that?
Yeah, thank you, Charles. I think I'll just start by saying, number one is partnerships, really, because as you heard the last speaker, no one government or investor or MDB can do it alone. So partnerships are very, very critical because you have limited dollars across the project value chain. And the most difficult dollars to come by are the project development and project preparation dollars. So to take that risk, and we also had that project finance will not be able to solve the problem. You have shorter contracts, and project finance requires longer tenors. Okay, when it comes to decarbonization, we hear this risk of stranded assets. That's why I highlighted the timeframes when we talk about decarbonization, net zero. Africa can decarbonize up to 2100. China, I think, is 2060, South Africa 2060 there or so. But what is important is the targets in your NDCs, typically about 20 or so % are what are mandatory. The rest, we say we will require foreign aid. And that foreign aid has been very elusive. So the first point is partnership. Start with what you have at the regional level. As I said, Africa is very diverse. North Africa is very different from Southern Africa. South Africa has a lot of coal. Mozambique has a lot of gas and hydro. So at that regional cluster level, that's where the corporations should start, leveraging the regional economic communities, etc., to structure projects, with the public entities setting the policy and legal framework to do so. There have been many, many studies, and I like the study between is it Hawildi study, where ADB, Africa Finance Corporation, etc., IGU came together. I like the study. The outlook is clear. The competing priorities are there, and the role of gas has been very clearly articulated. So now we really need to get the political authorities and policymakers to be aligned with the private sector, and also the legal and regulatory authorities. And this is where the convening power of ADB comes in terms of policy advocacy. As I said earlier, we have various platforms where we can convene people. We have various instruments that we can use, from technical assistance to grants to debt, mezzanine finance, equity, and guarantees. So all those instruments are there, and we can deploy them and partner to co-finance transformational projects. The other thing that's important is selectivity. We can't focus on doing many, many small things. We need to look at projects that are transformational at the regional level, that will assist the just energy transition and decarbonization. So gas assets cannot be stranded, because if carefully planned, they can be repurposed and used, even not if they are not done so. We're in 2023. If you have another 40 years even, those gas assets will not be stranded. So we have to put things into context. And we have to focus on which countries are the worst emitters, for example. But having said that, if we contribute less than 4%, some people say, what is there to decarbonize? We don't contribute anything historically. We are still not contributing. So there's a study that if you triple the usage of gas, the increased emissions will be less than, is it 0.6%, meaning the world would not even notice. So the development imperative is critical. You have to focus on development first, and then create wealth, address poverty, and then many of the other problems across the continent will be solved. As I said again at the beginning, start with power, because power, if you have cheap power that's affordable, of the right quality, it then drives industrial development, whether it's through special economic zones or whatever strategy, or mining, whatever. So if you are competitive globally, then you have cheap power to produce fertilizer to feed your people, cheap power to industrialize, depending on whatever value chain you want to develop. You have cheap power to drive regional integration. Because if you have expensive power, then you are not competitive, it's unaffordable, etc., etc. So we cannot rely on aid totally. We should follow the AFC model, which I like very much. That's my former life, where you deploy African money from the diaspora, do world-class projects, and then that will also attract investors to come. And ADB sets the platform. When it comes to climate change, ADB is at the front runner. The reason we emphasize accessing cheap climate finance is to make sure that the projects are least cost and the tariffs and products are affordable. Because otherwise, if they are not affordable, nobody can afford it. Lastly, Africa is diverse, but Africa must be seen as a solution to Europe, to Asia, to the United States, etc. We are not begging. We know what to do, and we know how to structure projects. And if given the right environment, these transformational projects will happen. It will not be a switch, because many people think energy transition is like a switch. Today you are 80% coal, tomorrow you are zero. No, you had what it took Egypt 20 years. It took many other countries decades. So that timeline, if you have smart strategies, you focus on transformational projects that don't compromise on your development and energy security whilst you transition to net zero. That's the way to go. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director Bachi, for the insight. Indeed, this is very, very pragmatic. The bank has a very clear strategy moving forward. Yes, I'm sure that the participant will pick a few key takeaways moving forward. As we are running really towards the end, I would like to request participants for more time to be able to cover the rest of the program. So I'm suggesting 15 minutes additional to the program so that we can cover the rest of the panel discussions and the concluding remarks. Yes, so I hope that works for everyone. So let me move to the next speaker. I'm going to Professor Wang. Professor Wang, would you like to share with us, because we are now still discussing about the energy transition, from Africa and from Asia's perspective, how do you see gas playing a role in the energy transition? We just heard from Director Bachi Balde that Africa will need more time to reach net zero. How about Asia? And how is this affecting the project cycle moving forward and our collaboration? Over to you, Professor.
Thank you, Charles. So you know that the energy transition and also the carbon net zero, the target. So I think that is is quite difficult for, also is time consuming for Asia, particularly in China, to put forward the energy transition. So comparing to the advanced countries, so for for example, the United States and European countries. So their economic system so more focused on service. The economy so focused on the technology, education, finance. So their economy is energy and not so intensive. Yeah. So but for the China and for Asia developing countries, so our economy is so more energy intensive. So we have China we have water factory, and for the India, so they are or for ASEAN countries. So they have now their plan to increase investment in the manufacturing sectors. So this means that in the future they will experience rapid economic development, and they will experience urbanization and industrialization. So this means that they need to consume more energy. And another aspect that so they want to push forward the energy transition. So to reduce the coal consumption, so they need to consume more renewable energy. So, but it's quite difficult. So I just give you, for example, for China. So in Chinese energy mix, about 60% of energy comes from coal. And so also for the electricity, we have depend on the coal electricity. So our energy system is that coal heavily depends on coal and the carbon intensive. So this means that if China reduce substantially the consumption of coal, so this means that in China we need to retire many coal plants. So they need to make many maybe millions or maybe hundreds of thousands of people lose their job in the coal sectors. So this is one thing. So another thing is that China, we should adjust our economic systems. We should reduce the manufacturing sector, for example, the iron, steel, cement, so the infrastructure sectors. So this means that we should adjust the energy and the economic system adjustment. So this is a very great task for China. India and other ASEAN countries similar. So this means that the gas is very important. So gas is rich energy compared to the coal. Gas is much more clean. So this is the one aspect. So another aspect that for renewable energy, also they have opportunities. So because renewable energy, so China we are the largest investors in the renewable energy, in the solar and the wind. Also we are the largest manufacturers in the wind and solar. So we can take up the opportunity to increase the chance of the employment and also the increased economic activity in these renewable energy sectors. So this is for China. So this another thing is that for the natural gas, so compared to the coal electricity, natural gas is much more flexible. So the speed for the natural gas electricity to access the electricity network and also to the time to reach the full download is much shorter than the coal electricity. So this means that the development of the natural gas can provide a flexible, loose environment for the development of the renewable energy sectors. So also so I stop here. Yeah,
thank you. I really appreciate your passion. I think it's clear that given the structure of China's economy, which is very carbon intensive, and where there is opportunity for switching coal to gas in the next few years before the renewable energy can really be deployed. this suggests that natural gas still has a role to play in China. So thank you so much for sharing the perspective. Let me go to Mr. Jong-Kong Lee from the Korea Gas Technology. With us, the question is, how can Africa-Asia cooperation in the gas sector support the energy security of both regions? If you can share about, the collaboration, how do you see the collaboration between Africa and Asia, especially given the technology you have already developed in Korea, and how would that be, how would that drive energy security for both continents? Over to you. Mr. Lee, are you there? I'm not sure.
He's online. Yeah, he's online, but maybe we can move to the next speaker. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Let me move now to Yosuke Noguchi from JOGMEC. Mr. Yosuke, how to unlock Asia's private investment to Africa's gas sector value chain, balancing domestic consumption and export. What would be your perspective on Asia private investment to Africa? Over.
Okay. Thank you very much for your question. The potential of Africa is recognized around the world, including Japan, and JOGMEC makes a comprehensive decision on investment based on first, technical, second, economical, third, policy, and fourth is project implementation related issue. The economic feasibility factor include a variety of risks, including the fiscal terms and the profitability of the project, and how to reduce the risk are very important. In order to achieve both domestic consumption and export, I believe that it is necessary to achieve early production. Since the demand for energy, including fossil fuel, will increase in Africa and Asia due to population growth and industrialization in the future. And I believe that we can contribute to domestic consumption in the future by securing early income from export and building infrastructure in African countries. And to achieve early production and carbon neutrality in Africa, Asia has to invest in Africa and natural gas is a good solution. In addition, initiatives to promote investment in low carbon energy, such as gas pipeline through regional use, are also needed. In addition to this, initiatives to make gas more low carbon and blue hydrogen and blue ammonia are even better. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yosuke, for indicating the key areas where you see there's opportunity for Asia to invest in Africa, including infrastructure and local consumption. Let me move to the next. I'm going to call Lou Rukan from CNPC. Mr. Rukan, in your view, can you share with us some of the challenges for Africa becoming an LNG export hub to Asia? And how can these challenges be addressed by gas producers? Can you share with us, please?
Okay, thank you for your question. Briefly speaking, I think at least 4 challenges could be prevent the Africa becoming the LNG export harbor to Asia. The first one is the price. You know, relatively not the natural gas or LNG is not cheap. It's relatively expensive. In last year, it's extremely expensive. We see the price turbulence up and down, and the average price is very high. So to some degrees, prevent the natural gas exported to China. Actually, in China, you know, last year the LNG import volume decreased by at least 20%, and the pipeline gas increased by 8%. So generally, comparatively, that last year China's import volume of natural gas and LNG is shrinked by at least 10%. That is, you know, that is a big factor for the future of natural gas of Africa exported to China. The second one, I think, is the geopolitics risks. That is, you know, we see the just now some panelists mentioned that the Russia-Ukraine war, that because of the war, that you know, at least 100 billion cubic meters stopped to follow to Europe. So nowadays, Europe is trying their best to shrink, to get the gas from either North America or in the future the African market. So that is to some degree will prevent the further cooperation between China and between Asia and also the African market. The third one, I think, is the safety. Just now I mentioned the Mozambique, the natural gas and LNG project. Actually, another participant that I always say Total Energies now is also involved in the Mozambique project, but because of the serious safety situation in most parts of the Mozambique, so prevent Total to have a further development and to do the FID. So that is another prevention. The last but not least is investment, because you know, with the quick energy transition and also the you know, so for the future of the fossil fuel investment is for most of the IOCs, international oil companies, they take the pessimistic attitude to the fossil fuel investment. So it's also I think it is a big negative factor for the future of the Asia of the Africa market development. So what's
Can you allow me, Mr. Rukon, because the moderator is telling me to speed up, and just one last for your conclusion, please.
Okay. So my conclusion is we should have a balanced way. We should pay attention to the problems and to give more good environment for the development of the African gas development and the exportation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you so much to the panelists for the insights, and it has been a very, very refreshing and informative session. Thank you so much.
Mr. Fred Kavanagh is the division manager at the African Natural Resource Management and Investment Center of the African Development Bank. He oversees the oil, gas, and mining sector, and Fred has 30 years of experience in the extractive industry, working with the policy, regulation, and commercial aspect. So, Fred, the floor is yours now.
Thank you, Yuna. Thank you. Wow, this was exciting discussions. Thank you very much, all of you. My role is just to say thank you to especially our speakers from both Asia and Africa. You have unreservedly shared your knowledge without limitation. It is only the challenge we had of timing that, you know, limited our discussion. Otherwise, next time we would really like to interrogate you further and have time to be able to answer the questions that came along. For the organizers, thank you for organizing this event, and I would like to request that all the questions that came in are really answered one by one, and we get responses to each of the questions that was asked. I would like to thank all the people that attended and made the discussion such a rich discussion. Thank you. Today's event is only the first of two activities we have planned for 2023 in order to enhance our collaboration between Asia and Africa in the extractive sector. Today was about natural gas. Next time, about September time, we'll reach out to discuss the role of Asia and Africa in adding value to the critical minerals that exist in Africa. So wait for the announcement. We'll be coming back to you on this. But from the discussion today, this natural gas discussion just shows us that there is more work for all of us to do. More work because it is clear that natural gas is going to be relevant for the development of Africa, and that natural gas is still relevant even during the energy transition. Some people had written this off and said, stop investing in this. But that is coming to true that natural gas is actually the transition energy between the old fuels and the new where we are going. It was very clear from the sharing of knowledge here that the energy peak in Asia is not yet here. 2035 was the date that was given. So there is still work to do for all of us in order for us to use our natural resources domestically, like use the natural gas for domestic use. We need to do certain things. I was amazed by the example given by Korea Gas when they said in the Korea terminal, they have 4,900 kilometers of pipeline for gas. Clearly, such infrastructure does not exist in Africa. We need to be able to invest more in these areas in order to be able to use or speak about using this gas domestically. The market exists, and so we should be able to produce the natural gas for the market that exists. And this is true, especially because the latest discoveries of natural gas globally are actually in Africa. Namibia, South Africa, Mozambique, Tanzania, Senegal, Mauritania. So all of these exist, and we are in the position to be able to facilitate development of these natural resources. It is my hope that the discussions we have had today will lead to further collaboration between Africa and Asia, and that each of us indeed has a role. I'll close by thanking you all once again. Thank you for the time, and thank you for the dialogue, and for the entire team that organized this. Thank you. Thank you, our Asia office. Thank you, Natural Resources. Thank you, Energy Complex, for all the work that you did together. To our moderators, Yuna and Charles, I hope you're still here. Thank you very much. Nobody thanks you, but we will thank you for facilitating this discussion. Finally, I would like to thank the people who are behind the curtains, the interpretation team. There are many people who followed, even when they did not, have English as their first language. We had interpretation between English and French, and this team indeed did a good job. So thank you, interpretation team. So to all of you, thank you, and we hope to have such an excellent audience once again very soon. I would like to wish all of you a good day and a good night, especially because of the time variations we have between Africa and Asia. We are just at the two extremes. Thank you once again, and a special thank you to all our speakers. We will continue to reach out to you because indeed, now when he introduced the team, he said, this is the dream team. And indeed, it has proven that you have been a dream team. So thank you once again, and we hope to see you once again. Thank you, and bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Fred, for your, encouraging.
Thank you so much to everyone. Merci à tout le monde.
Yeah. Thank you,
Thank
you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Bye.
all.
think they are dropping fast.